yesterday you mentioned that you have ties to Taiwan, right? Can you tell us a bit of that story?
Well, I immigrated from Taiwan to United States, and well, that's a long time ago. If I tell you, then you'll know my age.
Just pick like stories related to the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a very interesting story of how I arrived to United States. It's different than most people. So my father, in 1949, he was 16 years old, and he was the only child in the family, and yet he was physically, psychologically, verbally abused. And
Why?
as the only child, you ask the question, why, right? So one day, he overheard a conversation on the other side of the wall, which says, well, he's not your biological son anyway. And when my dad heard it, he was so upset. His best friend in high school, he was 16 years old. And his best friends asked him, do you want to go to Taiwan? My uncle is a co-captain on the ship that's going to go to Kaohsiung, Taiwan. And he said, why not? So he took off, thinking that 2 weeks later, it's going to go back to Shanghai. So 2 weeks later, he went back to the port in Keelung, Taiwan. And at that time, he was turned away because they said in that 2 weeks' time in 1949, China had closed its doors to the world, had fallen into communism. And so he was left stranded in Taiwan, 16 years old, with no skills, no,
Nothing.
no family, no friends.
No support.
No support whatsoever. And he had to learn how to survive on his own. And he told himself, well, I'm jumping ahead to answer your question, but basically he started writing to my grandmother in Shanghai and let her know that where he was. And the letter had to readdressed in a Hong Kongese stamp, with Hong Kongese stamp and envelope, before it gets sent to China, because it was to protect her from being accused of communicating with a spy, in Taiwan. So his letter to my grandmother would go through a third party in Hong Kong, readdressed with Hong Kongese stamp and envelope.
How did you assure that the letter arrived?
I don't know. I didn't get that part from him, but it obviously did arrive because he was told from China, from Shanghai, 2 years later that his mother had committed suicide, like so many people at the time, because when it became communism, you cannot speak your mind. Everything is turned upside down. Black is white is black. Kind of similar to what's going on in the United States in the last 4 years. And so you almost have to have no principle to be able to survive in that environment. And a lot of people committed suicide, and it wasn't just her. So it took 37 years later, after my dad left Shanghai, to after he got his citizenship in United States, that he was willing to go back to mainland China, because without the protection of a U.S. passport, he could be detained and jailed carrying a Taiwanese passport. And this was the year in 1986 when China first opened its doors. And so my dad, he went back to Shanghai, and he went to the house that he left, that he had memories of growing up. And lo and behold, he saw the same landlord still living there. And the landlord, so my dad says, this is 1986. Everyone wore the green suits with gold leaf buttons. And men and women almost fashioned the same hairstyle. And I now understand that that was because people were so afraid to show their individuality, to stand out. That's so different than the mindset in the United States, where everyone is themselves. They get to express their thoughts, how they talk, in their clothing, everything, how they live. And so, but in China in 1986, everyone dressed the same. And so everyone told my dad how great China is. And he said the only person that was willing to tell him the truth was the landlord in Shanghai, because the landlord recognized my dad from 37 years ago. And he trusted my dad that he left to Taiwan, and then now suddenly he's back again. My dad looked different than the rest of everyone there. And so he told my dad that during the Cultural Revolution, he was maybe 50 something years old. And they were the Red Guard. So the Chinese Communist Party manipulated the mostly easily manipulated group of people. And you know who those are. The teenagers, right? The teenagers who think, well, I've gone to school for 12 years, all these years, I know a lot already in life. And the country told them, the government said, you are our eyes and ears on the ground. You will share what you know, whether it's from your teachers in the classroom or conversations in a family setting. You are to protect our communist ideology and to make this country
Great.
or I don't know, I wasn't there. But this is what they're sold on, to report back to your country. And the teenagers didn't know any better, and they reported their teachers, their own parents, who were then sent to the countryside to do hard labor farming for 12 years as re-education. And the landlord said he was also not immune to it, and he hid his gold bar in the gutter in the countryside. He says, you don't want to have anything to do with wealth because your head could be on the chopping block. And so the landlord then told my dad that these teenagers who were given the red band.
Yeah, like 3 or 2 strips.
Okay.
If the teenagers are doing well, they're gonna have 3 strips.
They have rankings?
Yes. Yeah. You know why they have the green color, but the higher echelon is a blue color?
Class system?
No, they are separating people to different layers.
Okay.
The ordinary Chinese people are the ones who are being slaved, like a grass. They have to burn for the Chinese Communist Party.
Wow.
You know why?
No idea.
Yeah, we just learned it from the broadcast. It's just casual talk. So from our knowledge, the red flag, there's a red flag and then 5 stars in there, right? So in the Chinese Dao culture, Daojia, the red, it's heating the star. But who will be the red? The Chinese people.
The people.
Who's the stars? The Chinese Communist Party.
Being controlled by a handful of people only.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no equality.
No.
It's only what's good for me is what's good for me and no one else.
No,
Yeah.
they don't. But that's the essence of communism. They don't care about people. It's just like the other day we were talking with Phil. The 1% control everything.
Yeah. Isn't it ironic how they are able to sell it to the masses and get away with not having people talk about it? Like, political systems are so intertwined with our daily lives. And they can take your freedom away. They can tax you to death. They can do all kinds of things. Your privileges as opposed to your rights, which are really not from the government, because any government can become corrupt and tyrannical. So who's to say, who is to set the laws of the land, right? And so back to sharing about my father's journey. So the landlord said the children with the red armbands would storm his house in Shanghai between 2 and 4 in the morning and kick him on the ground while he
The
was
children kick him.
the teenagers in high school
That's a loss of faith.
will abuse him physically to get him to confess to things that he did not do. And so he knew that if he would confess to anything, that will only stop the beating temporarily. And they were there beating him, he said, for a whole month, every day, between 2 and 4 in the morning. And so he did not confess to anything, just so that he hoped that his 50-some-year-old body would be able to hang on. He said it was very brutal and very difficult time in his life. And he also shared that what happened was that in China, after the communists took over everything was quiet. People heard that communism was coming because it started in Russia. So people who have wealth got word of it and took their possessions like in truckloads. 13 loads I heard from one Shanghainese businessman drove all the way down to Hong Kong. And when they heard after communists took over, everything was quiet and well, they missed their families back home. So their friends said, hey, everything is fine, just come back. So half a year later, they came back. But the landlord said everything was done in steps. They were taking down names of people, what they said, when they said it. And they were collecting information about everyone. So you didn't know who was a communist member working to spy on you at the time. And unfortunately, now we have Big Brother, right? That's so easily done. They're taking data on Facebook, LinkedIn, everywhere. And what people don't realize that the deep state is so real. And the deep state in the United States are the same group of people who started communism in Russia hundreds years ago. So these people have an agenda for world domination. And they hide behind the scene so that there's nobody counteracting their tactics. This is part of Sun Tzu's war, right? You hide so that your enemy don't know who you are, so you won't be attacked. And you can continue to promote what you're doing at a very highly effective level. And so I'm so glad this is your life goal and purpose, because you're interviewing people to share their knowledge. Everyone can be a contributor to a more free society by sharing all the information that we have learned in our lives.
Yes.
So the landlord told my dad that everything was fine, and people started coming back to China who ran away, came back. And the first step was they said, under a certain false pretense, they said, we need all the guns. Please turn your guns in so that we can fight against another enemy. And so people naively did that. And so they have no weapon to defend themselves. And this is where I say again, any government under psychopaths or wrong leadership can become a tyrannical government. It can happen here in the United States, falling into the red hands of wrong people because they never play by the rules. And so the landlord said that suddenly, overnight, all the able-bodied men in China were rounded up. In Shanghai, I don't know about the whole China, but at least in Shanghai, police knock on people's doors and said, we need your son and your husband to come to the police station.
Why?
And they were not seen again. Because men have 40% more muscle mass than women. They're designed to hunt down animals for meat and fight. They have easily 100 times the testosterone that females have. Females' testosterone levels are between 25 to 75. Men's testosterone levels are between 450 to 750. You see the difference? Mm-hmm. And that's the mid-range. So men were eliminated from the society as protectors for their family, for women and children. Then they can take down the family structure in the society more easily. Now, communism wants to destroy family unity, because a family that's bonded through love and blood will do anything to protect one another. But when you have a government that want you to be loyal to itself, then they need to destroy your family first. And that's why in the United States, we're seeing a lot of promotion of gay pride. What is gay pride? How do you put the word gay and pride together? Pride, in all my life growing up, has been a word that you use for an action that you've done that is honorable, that is worthy of, praise. It's something hard, so you have pride in your hard work and in, wherever you do, because it's based on merit. To put gay pride is a promotion of a culture that usually is known to be, not supporting of family values. Because how do you create a family? I mean, I know that this is the traditional way, and I know about the modern way. They want to conflate the concepts so as to break down the society and make people, have people be supportive of abnormal, I would say, I don't know if I want to use the word deviant sexual behavior, but you will see that in Rome. In before the fall of Rome, before the fall of a society, it's been correlated. You can read this from history books, where if the population swells and the number of a percentage of people who are identified as gay, the society goes down. Because there are certain behaviors that come with that lifestyle. And that's another topic I want to stick to what my dad learned from the landlord. And the landlord said, so they took down people's information first, right? And compiled them. And then one day, they just took the symbol, that instrument. It's a metal round disc in China that they hit. What do you call it?
Hammer.
I don't know what it's called, but it's like tone made of brass.
Lua.
Maybe it's made of brass. Yeah, and so they would walk around the city and get people to call people to the town square, and people would stick their heads out the window and to see what's going on. And they said, well, we're having a town hall meeting right now, so everyone gathered to go to the town square. And on the stage, they saw their neighbors and their relatives with their hands tied behind their back with a board that has black writing on the board that describe what crime they're being accused of. And they're ushered on the stage, and the communist comrade would say, okay, Mr. Liu, on March 17, 2019, you try to make a profit by selling your, green chives to your neighbor, and it's not conducive to our communist philosophy, ideology. And on, October 15, 2021, you did this. And they'll mix communist members in the audience, and they'll ask, anyone else in the audience have anything to say about Mr. Li, the things that he has done over the last few years? And they'll raise their hands and say, yeah, I know he did this. And another person say, yeah, he did this to me. Instead of sharing what he's made, he tried to negotiate, a profit for himself. And as a result, they just said, well, the people have spoken, and they execute them right there on the spot in front of everyone. And so it puts tremendous fear in people's hearts, because they didn't know that they were being recorded for the last few years. So people became really careful about what they say. That it breeds a culture where people are not speaking the truth, because you can lose your life over it. And so the landlord said that's how they control people. If anyone wants to speak the truth, there's no grounds for it, because it's life and death. And so when my dad went there in 1986 in Shanghai. I visited his landlord in 1996, and he was 90, in his 90s. And this is where I understand what communism means. He owns the whole building. It's a 3-story building in Shanghai. Yet, he was given the room downstairs on the first level in the lobby where his bedroom is. People walk by his bed every day to go to the 2nd and 3rd level. He had no privacy. And
He was given a room?
he got to stay in his own building,
But the building is owned by communists.
I suppose.
government.
So he was given a place in the lobby as his bedroom. And that was how communism work. You don't have a say in your property rights. And so that extends, our property rights extend to our body. If you don't own your own body, then that means you're someone else's slave. And so during COVID, this is another telltale sign of a tyrannical government, a tyrannical regime, is when they tell you what you have to do with your body. If you don't want to inject yourself with an experimental drug, you should be able to say,
No.
I own my body. I don't want anything injected. And I will stay home to not infect anybody. You should have that option. If that's not given, then someone else owns your body. And that's not freedom. And same thing with First Amendment. Your ability to construct anything in your mind and speak it is of the highest value and importance in any society. Because if you have kings and queens who are tyrannical, they don't want you to speak against them, or they just don't want you to find out, to reveal their lies, and they want to shut you down. That's tyranny. That's not a free society. And so First Amendment in the United States is backed up by Second Amendment, which is gun rights. Because if you want to, defend your right to speech, and someone says, no, you cannot, what do you have to do? You cannot argue with a person who puts a gun to your head. You have to be able to defend your property. And your thoughts is also your property because it comes from you. You made it. And so Second Amendment in the United States is designed to back up, defend First Amendment rights. So they go hand in hand. You have to have two. That's why the Communist Party removed guns from people. In the United States, we have the largest population of gun owners. You don't see school shootings. It's because they're law-abiding. Most people are law-abiding. But the deep state will have you believe otherwise because they want to create false events to create their narrative that serves their narrative. And people who are weak-minded, who don't stand for any principles or were not taught any principles can fall for things. There's this expression, if you don't stand for anything, you can fall. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Now in the United States, the Communist Party has entrenched at every level of the government and in institutions as well. In San Francisco, when I ran for office, I noticed that there were a lot of people who were running as social justice warriors. So these people don't care about merits. So like Communist Party, nothing is based on merit. Everything is government assigned privileges. So if you listen to the government and do its bid, then you will get more food ration, or you will get better housing or better jobs. Communists operate on privileges that are dictated by the top instead of merit. And so these people, they will run for office in San Francisco, and they run on as social justice warriors, touting that there's all kinds of discrimination and economic inequality, some of which are true. But that's another topic I can go into. It's by design.
I think political staffs should not be a career path. Like people are getting it to a career right now, so people can use their power and their position to take advantage of it. That's what I think.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so from the story that you shared, I have a lot of thoughts. But I want to begin with the education that you mentioned. You said that the younger generation back in the Cultural Revolution went to people's houses and started beating people. Right now, our education system is corrupted as well. Not only in communist China, but during our stay in Canada, or if we hear from the United States, the education system, it's being one-sided as well. It's just like communist China.
Yes.
It's not very encouraging creativity.
Mm-hmm.
what's your suggestions if we are restructuring the education system in the future?
First of all, that's a very good question. When you participate in a society, what do you need to know?
The rules?
The rules. Just like when you're playing any video games or board games, you need to know the rules. Now, in the United States, when I immigrated in 1981, I was so excited years later when I was going to take a civics class that was offered in high school. I said, I'm going to learn everything I can about what makes the United States great. Because why would people of all the different countries come to the United States and nowhere else? But I was sorely disappointed. I went to the best high school in San Francisco. And what I realized was that it was by design that we were not taught the rules or rights. The citizens' rights were not taught to us. What we were given were non-essential information like how many days do the representative convene, every year. That is not the meat and potato of the rights that we need to know. So you are left in the United States generations after generations of people who don't know their rights. And so the problem is presented in the forms of when you see your rights being taken away or actually when you see your rights being challenged in the newspaper, you don't have the context to understand how to defend your rights. You have not insufficient knowledge. So yes, we know that our First Amendment is, free speech, which includes freedom of religion and freedom of press, freedom to assemble, which is you should be able to assemble, come as a group of people and voice your grievances to the government. People don't understand that they have those rights, and the government, in fact, trample on it. Quash down demonstrations, what have you. If you have peaceful demonstration to present your thoughts, that should be allowed. The first thing for everyone, if you cannot rely on your own government to educate you on the God-given rights that all of us have, then educate yourself about First Amendment, Second. There are all these information out there. Don't get brainwashed by the mainstream news that are really propaganda. And I would add that the difference between the United States citizens and that of Russia and China is that the US citizens, many of them don't know that they're being fed propaganda. That's the difference. And because we have what you call deep state organizing and doing all these control in the back, so part of their agenda is to not educate the masses their rights. And that's why we have to take back our school. A lot of people in the United States are homeschooling. At this convention, you'll see that there's a lot of homeschool booths available to support parents who are willing to invest in their children's education, because what they get nowadays in the public schools are just propaganda and no real value. In 2022, October of 2022, the United States national debt, you know how much it was?
No.
31 trillion. But the combined wealth of this 300 family members from the deep state is 476 trillion. They can own and buy any representatives in a republic or democracy. And the only thing that we have standing in the way are righteous people, people who believe in doing the right thing. We need to raise generations of that. And that's why in the communist government, they do not want religion. They don't want a group of people who believe in righteousness, in goodness, in kindness, so that they can control you to massacre your own people. And that's why we have 60 million people eliminated in China during the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah, they first destroy the faith, morality. Then they're gonna destroy the trust between the people.
Mm-hmm.
so that it's only for single individuals,
Yes.
and it's easy to break it down.
That's very good.
Yeah. So yeah, now I remember when you talk about families, that's what I want to ask you. But you mentioned it in the homeschooling as well. I think family is the major unit that starts. I don't know if you read the book The Making of America. No, it's one of my friends referred to me, The Making of America. So there's a pyramid saying that the people at the top, and then down from that is the family, then your county, and then your country. So it should be focused on yourself first, how to develop your individuality, and then you as a complete self, your role, you unite your family, you bond together, then you will
makes
have a
sense.
great community, have a great country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's the principle that not only for the United States, for Americans, but also for people around the world. And communists and other 1% psychopaths who knows the tricks, they're trying to break this down.
Yes.
And now what we're doing is to spread this information to let people know that the way that we are breaking down this enslavement is to build up your faith.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you
That's
for
really deep.
sharing this story.
Thank you.
Take it out, CCP!